How's it, everyone? So today I'm doing something that I've been really planning to do for a long time, and that is to use my old Yashica LM in studio. And it does have a port for flash photography, an export, but I have tested it, doesn't work that well. And you know, at about $1 a frame in South Africa, it's an expensive exercise, you know, to have missed frames and all that. So I just decided to go with continuous light like they would have in 1959 when this camera was manufactured. I have made a video about this camera before where I used it to shoot expired film from 1994. It actually expired in 1994. But this time around, I'm going to give this camera a bit more of a fighting chance and shoot Ilford FP4. What I wanted to do today is really just shoot some pictures of my friend Vickers, who was so kind as to agree to come and stand in. It's going to be a very basic setup. It's really just having some fun with this camera in studio. One or two notes on this camera is it is not particularly sharp. This camera has seen some damage. The light meter doesn't work, so I've had to take some manual readings. So the setup I did is actually very basic. We've got a light at 45 degrees to the subject. You'll see if we move him forward a little bit more. There we go. You start getting the Rembrandt triangle over there. Classic portrait lighting with a little bit of fill from the side, because it's quite contrasty. We're shooting black on black, and the FP4 is quite a contrasty film. So we're gonna see how far we can manage with one light source. Let's load this baby up and get going. I've got the FP4 in here. I'm gonna turn to the magic arrow, which tells us that we are ready to start shooting. Close the camera up. There we go. And turn the knob some more until it gets to frame number 1, and let's get cracking. Now, before we get going, we need to remember that this type of camera is not automatic in any way. You need to cock the shutter, you need to advance the film every time. So nothing happens by itself. So if you don't advance the film, you end up with a bunch of double exposures. Let's get going. Vickers is just going to stand around and I'm just going to take some pictures of him. So this Yashica LM has a maximum aperture of f3.5. I took a reading using my camera, a very simple reading, and I landed at f3.5, a 50th of a second. FP4 is rated at 125 ISO. In reality, it's probably closer to 100. I remember years ago we used to do sensitometry tests, and that's what it came down to. But for the sake of the exercise today, I'll overexpose just a little bit. Instead of shooting at a 60th of a second, I'll shoot at a 50th of a second, just for that marginal third of a stop overexposure. Film's got so much, you know, exposure latitude that you can fix a lot in processing and then also in the scan. We're shooting on an 80mm fixed lens, so 80mm is standard, basically in this 50mm for full frame. On a 6x6 format like this, 80mm is your standard focal length. So that is the view that we have of Vickers currently in the viewfinder. If you want to do fine focusing, you pop the little loop out and then you put your eye down there and you can fine focus. One needs to watch out for parallax errors, because this lens is just a viewing lens and that one is the actual lens that's going to do the exposure, and it contains the shutter. So everything that I see is probably going to be a little bit higher than what the camera sees. Now the problem is, if I try and compensate for that like this, I might end up, you know, with images that is completely out of frame and whatnot. Also, just take note that the single light that we have is close enough to the background so that we have some fall off, because otherwise there would be absolutely no separation here. If I block this off, this would be completely black, but then he would blend into the background. So I don't mind a little bit of separation, a little bit of fall off on this. But if for some reason you wanted to stop that, you would need to put a flag or a gobo up here just to block that light. Now the big challenge with the old viewfinder like that is to get sharp focus in the eyes. There we go. Drop your chin somewhat for me. There we go. All right, and before I forget, let's cock the shutter. Let's see that the settings are right. We have 50th, f3.5, and let's double check our focus. I'm gonna drop the loop so I can see a bit of a bigger shot, and that will be frame number 1. That's it. That's the sound. That's it. Just click. That's the beauty of a TLR. That's why it was so popular to use in symphonies and ballets and stuff, because it made no noise. Wind on. We're going to see if we can get that Rembrandt triangle over there. Drop your chin for me. I'm going to try and get a little bit higher. That's a problem with shooting a camera that's meant for waist level viewing. If you're close on the subject, you end up shooting up the nostrils, which you don't want. That's it. That's frame number 2. That's $2 down, just in exposures. Closest focusing distance on this little lens is actually just 3.3 feet. That's as close as you can get, which is typical of standard lenses in general. But I now need to lift myself a little bit, and I think for that I shall use a little step ladder. And again, serious into camera. I'm going to take a shot of him a little bit closer to the background. So we're going to have a little bit of compensation to do with exposure. So if he takes a full step back, a little bit back, there we go. And I move this light proportionally the same. It shouldn't change the exposure. Here we go, that's another frame. Focus at this distance through a viewfinder that's not that clear. It's a little bit more difficult, but there we go. Vickers has got a big piece of art happening on his back. He says it's 50 hours in, there's another 50 hours to go, so we're going to maybe take one shot of that. But for that I'm going to change the lighting again a little bit, just bring it back from the background to create some separation. Right, so we're going to focus on the back detail there. Okay, that's an easy frame. Yeah. I can see that I'm going to get a little bit of flare through here, but I actually don't mind. It's entering the frame sort of in the corner, and I don't mind that too much. Ooh, see there, I pressed the shutter, but it wasn't cocked. There we go. That's it, that was interesting. I want to get a bit more fall off on the background, because the separation might be a little bit too subdued. If we look at the light on his face with the white table, you'll see there's a bit of fall that comes in there. But the moment I add this, it drops away. And so you're definitely going to get a slightly more contrasty image than you would if you had a white tabletop setting. Okay, but I need to try and focus now. Let's see. Okay, that's one frame. Cock the shutter. I'm not going to give you a warning. We're going to go for that old school portraity look, you know, where we get the catch light in the eye, and there we go. That's stunning. That's it. No, exactly. With the last roll of film from Ilford, I think it was XP2, I was very disappointed in that the glue on this little strip just tasted like glue. It tasted like a post office issue envelope. It was horrible. I was used to, especially in my younger days, of having a smorgasbord of flavors in my little strip. I'm particularly partial to the lemon, but you know, mint, all those things, you know, it's just something special at the end of a roll. Let's see if Ilford FP4 Plus has any joy for me. So, it's the time of reckoning. I have my film back from the lab, and just a quick squiz against the light. I can tell that these were definitely low-key portraits, because it's quite light, these negatives. What I can see is that this film was underdeveloped. By simply looking at the rebate area, it is fairly light. It's crisp, but it's fairly light. It's not black. It is definitely just like a medium to dark gray, which is unfortunate, because that means with a low-key portrait, and if you have I slightly overexposed, but if you have under processing, that means you're going to lose a lot of detail in your negs. Even though these negatives have, especially FP4 specifically, you can underexpose for about 1.5 stops, and you can overexpose for up to 6 stops and still retain information. All right, so let's have a look at the images. You'll notice a lot of portraits shots in the old days were shot from waist level, and it just gives a slightly different perspective, especially if it only has a standard lens on it. So there's still a little bit of perspective warp. But looking at this image close up, we can see it is not sharp. Now, I'm willing to, that is what you see there. Some of that is spherical aberration. It has the appearance of motion blur, but it's actually not motion blur. That is a lens that is not sharp. Like you see, this is probably the sharpest part of the image, and everything from there should at least have been somewhat in focus. So you can see at the top there, definitely, you know, that parallax I was speaking about. Even though it's completely out of focus and not sharp, I really do like this image. Let's go with this one. Okay, so here is a situation where a little bit more processing could have helped. Like you can see, the scan was made to maintain the highlight integrity, but I would have pushed the highlight a little bit more, and if had there been more processing, there would have been more usable detail on the side of his face. My focusing was a little bit off. Like you can see, the arm is actually in focus, but you've got to remember is that this is a TLR camera, and I'm focusing that lens, but that's the lens doing the work. So even this could be completely sharp. This lens could be fantastic for all I know, but this lens could have had a bit of damage and might not be sharp anymore. And I know that this camera has definitely taken some hits in its life. So sharpness is I think a bit of wishful thinking with this camera at this stage. But again, same thing. I like the vibe. It's a bit contrasty. I mean, if I was to just do a very basic curve pull, I'd bring a little bit more highlight and keep the midtones about there, but I would need to bring a little bit of this highlight in there. If I was printing, I would just dodge a little bit over there. This, however, is not the camera's fault. Probably as sharp as we're going to see today. Again, problem, you've got thin negatives. They're not properly developed. It's a low-key image to begin with. I've also noticed that there's this line, and if I look at the film at the neck, there is a line for some reason popping through every now and again, and I think that might actually be damage on the film roll. It either banged or something, or there was some, because it does repeat on the negatives a little bit, so that's unfortunate. Luckily we can get rid of that if we really want to. But with this camera, you know, with all the, look at all those spots that's in the camera, there's dust in the lens, there's all sorts of little artifacts. And again, I would prefer to have a little bit, this is too contrasty for my taste. I would just bring that down a little bit, not quite like that. But if you don't have a great scan to start off with, and you don't have a great neg, it's gonna, you know, it's gonna be tough. But I'll do high-res scans of these and have a look-see. I like that frame. So this is actually a very nice frame. Like I said, that's probably about as sharp as we're gonna see with this camera. And I have to say, if you use a Yashica from this period that is not in bad nick, they're generally actually very sharp. The lenses are actually not bad. It's nothing like this. But at the same time, I am digging it. I like the scan, even though it's probably a bit hard, a bit dark. I really do like this frame. I really do. Oh, there's a little bit of flare coming in at the top there, like I mentioned. Yeah, that's, see, there's this line again running straight through the image. That's unfortunate. I'm liking the light. I really am. Ooh, double exposure. Rookie mistake, rookie mistake. There's something strangely compelling about these type of images. Also weirdly compelling. I actually love that. I dig that.
Scan is a bit hard, a bit contrasty. High-res scan will sort these things out, pull some detail that might not be readily available, but future reference, I would probably ask them to push the processing by half a stop, seeing that they seem to process a little bit light. And that's a pleasant portrait. And the square format just also harks back to a different time. So that was the Ilford FP4 Plus developed by Mr. Harmon. I think the first FP was done in 1935, if I'm not mistaken. And this particular FP4 Plus has been going since 1990. Talk about, technology that lasts. Anyways, thanks so much for checking out this video. Please like, subscribe, comment, share, all those things. And if you have a bit of time, why not watch one of these 2 videos that will appear here at some point in the next couple of seconds. See you in the next one.